And he already gave up. His shoulders were slumped. He was emotionally defeated. Back then, he had this imaginary hero of his. The dude that kept screaming, "Kia, Kia," like stabbing everybody with imaginary knives or swords, because we bought him a couple of swords to play with. And he started just screaming in the top of his lungs, got into the superhero pose position, and going, "Kia, Kia," for about 2 minutes straight, maybe 3 minutes. He ended up losing the fourth match because we were just doing superhero pose instead of playing the match. But then what happened afterwards was transformational. He changed his state so much that he won the last few matches. Welcome back to Raising Game Changers podcast. My name is Story with my beautiful wife,
NatalyaStory.
and I'm super excited about the topic we're going to be discussing today because it's extremely empowering to yourself, to your kids, and we're going to be talking about NeuroBioHacks. I actually coined the term, that I took that website a long time ago when we came across that idea that, they're not just biohacks like everybody understands, but they're also NeuroBioHacks. And I took that domain, NeuroBioHacks.com, and I think after this podcast, I'm actually going to put the website together and have people go there in order to be able to learn about this stuff.
Cool.
Make it a free kind of training site for NeuroBioHacks. But let's kind of define what NeuroBioHacks are, first of all. Just like biohacks, right? A hack is something that gives you outside return in your investment on time and effort. That's what a hack is. Like a growth hacking is a technique in Silicon Valley. The most famous growth hacking technique was, I think, Hotmail. That's how they exploded their company with that single line at the end of every email. This email was sent with Hotmail. And that was a growth hack. That's how Hotmail became, what it was before Gmail took it down. Or was it Yahoo first? Whatever, either one of them. So a NeuroBioHack is a mental exercise that, given the amount of time and effort you will spend on it, gives an outsized return on that time. And there's a few that we identified overall, but I think it's important first to actually backtrack a little bit and start talking a little bit about the brain, because for decades, what we thought about the brain turned out to be not true. We had this idea of a triune brain, right? The brain is kind of split into three different parts. There's the reptilian part, there's this limbic part, second one, and then there's this cognitive rational part afterwards. And for decades, we have laws passed based on that notion that we have a triune brain. And now we actually know that's not the case. The brain doesn't work this way. I think the better model of understanding how the brain works was introduced by a guy who wrote that book, Thinking Fast and Slow. He's a professor out of Princeton. Forgot his name. I have his name actually noted here. Daniel Kahneman. Yeah. So, and it's kind of like explains that, when we evolve the first few years, when we create those neural connections, that becomes your system one, which is your emotional response, the first and foremost, the one that actually processes information very fast. And only then does it get into the system two, which is the more cognitive part, the more rational part of your thinking. And the issue is that whenever something happens in your life, you first use system one to respond to it before it even gets to system two. We are kind of emotional beings. Lisa Feldman-Barron had an amazing book about that called How Emotions Are Made. Few years ago, I think 2014, and which actually explains the whole premise of System 1 versus System 2 a little bit better. And I think leveraging that knowledge now, we can actually create different exercises that we call NeuroBioHacks, because they're cognitive exercises that can really elevate a lot of things. Ability to learn, how kids feel, how we feel, and a lot of other things.
But it's also, I think, important to mention that brain doesn't work separately from the body. So the whole nervous system is going through from the brain through the spinal cord. So our entire body gets affected by thoughts, by our emotions, and it works all together. Like, we can't separate brain from our nervous system, from our habits, from our behavior, from our emotions. It's all coming together. And these hacks, for me personally, and when I'm applying to my kids, it's sort of like the easy way to make sure that they are in control of the entire system of their body.
This is something that Andrew Huberman calls the body-to-mind contract.
Yeah, exactly.
And the best way to affect the brain, it starts with the body, right? That's why, the biohacks are so important. Before we even get to NeuroBioHacks, we can actually mention that, like, the number one biohack is exercise. Really. It's, old beaten up formula, but if you don't exercise, no matter how good you're feeling right now, long term, you're not going to feel good. You're going to be anxious, you're going to develop anxiety. Our body has a certain biological need for exercise.
For me, it's sleep.
No, sleep is number one. But if you
Uh,
just sleep well, but don't exercise, give it 10 years, give it 20 years, you're going to become anxious and paranoid. Maybe not paranoid, but definitely anxious. It's just you're not going to feel good. Doesn't matter. Your body has a requirement that needs to be fulfilled. If you don't fulfill that, the body will actually make the brain feel bad. But we can reverse that. And now we can have these neurobiohacks that are super powerful. I think the most famous one that most people, well, not most, but a lot of people are familiar with is the one by Amy Cuddy from Harvard, and that's the superhero pose. Because that's the one that kind of shared a TED talk about it. That's the one that kind of went viral, and a lot of people know that about that. And let's just kind of like go over what that is. The superhero pose is when you, and her research showed that 120 seconds of that is enough, just 2 minutes of that. The superhero pose is when you get into the power pose of opening up your chest and your shoulders. She recommends standing up into a superhero position, whether it's Superman or anything like that. And you spend 2 minutes in that position, and just that physiological change in your state will affect the state of your mind. And the results were actually quite interesting. After just 2 minutes of exercise, people were a lot more confident on interviews. They were talking differently. They were behaving differently. That's the kind of the most famous neurobiohack that I know of. But there's a lot of other ones that are very, very powerful.
yeah, but this one especially got its recognition for because it was tested and tried on kids, on adults,
Mm-hmm.
on different genders. So basically, the study shows the effect of increasing confidence in kids, how they felt, how they performed after that, and on adults too. So, and it's harmless. It's absolutely harmless. It's kids. It's easier for them. It's you kind of tapping into their imagination as well, because they like for kids, superheroes are real heroes, right? It's like with all different superpowers. So it's also easy applicable towards kids because of all the imagination in like naturally for them. Maybe for adults it's a little bit harder.
No, it's not. It's actually quite powerful for adults as well.
I mean, it's harder to imagine yourself as a superhero, but for kids especially, it's in their nature basically. And also, I was just.
But you can gamify that. You know what? When I learned about this technique, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to interject here about the adults. My LinkedIn coach, Tyrone Giuliani, shout out to Ty. When he was coaching me on that, he was teaching other students in the classroom, or not in his master class, on this technique. You know what he does? Why do you think we have the Thor hammer in our house? That toy.
I threw it out.
Okay, but we had it for a few years, right? Because I bought it because when he was teaching that to students, he would use that. He had the Thor hammer. He would get up in a Thor position, raise his arm, put on AC/DC Thunderstruck, and just rock out to that music for a couple of minutes before making any kind of sales call. And they would completely change. I tried it. Completely changed the way you feel. You're a lot more aggressive on a phone call. It works. It 100% works.
You just reminded me about Comic-Con is coming to New York. I need to buy tickets.
So yeah, Amy Cuddy's superhero pose is a powerful tool, and you can be gamified. And you're right, for kids it's a lot easier. Remember that time when Sky used it when he was playing chess and he was losing? Let me tell that story because it's really quite an interesting story. We heard him screaming, right? He was playing chess. He was playing a tournament. That was about a year and a half, 2 years ago.
He was 5.
He was
five.
6. He was 6. It was 2 years ago after COVID. We were here.
Yeah, it was during COVID.
During COVID, yeah, he was 6.
Okay.
All right, but either way, so he was playing chess and he was locked in his own room. So when we just heard screams, he was screaming. So we went up to the room to see what was going on, and he was so frustrated. He just lost his first 3 or 4 matches, and the last one he lost just by a mistake, and he already gave up. And that's it. His shoulders were slumped. He was emotionally defeated. So I just told him, all right, put the computer away, turn it off, or don't turn it off. Like push it away, get up, let's do a superhero pose. And back then he had this imaginary hero of his, right? I forgot what the hero name was, but the dude that kept screaming "Kia, Kia," like stabbing everybody with these imaginary knives or swords, because he had this. We bought him a couple of swords to play with, the toy swords, and so we got onto this. I took my Thor hammer that I learned from Ty, and Sky got his playful those swords, and he started just screaming in the top of his lungs. Got into the superhero pose position and going kia kia for about 2 minutes straight, maybe 3 minutes. He ended up losing the fourth match because we were just doing superhero pose instead of playing the match. But then what happened afterwards was transformational. He changed his state so much that he won the last few matches. And just to see that transformation from somebody who was mentally defeated, right, shoulder slumped, he lost the first 3 matches, then the fourth one, he made a mistake and lost that one by a mistake. And that's it. He was giving up on the whole tournament, and he actually ended up, I don't know, but I think he ended up being in top 10 out of the 20 kids that were playing in that tournament, right, because he won the last 4 matches, which he would have lost as well if he didn't do the superhero pose.
At that moment, I realized it's good to live in a house, not in the apartment.
Well, true story. Well, when it comes to that, when it comes to kids.
But it's kind of probably similar for adults as what Jordan Peterson calls 12 rules for life. The first rule he has is make sure that your shoulders
Stand up with your
back.
shoulders back. Yeah, and walk.
Make sure that your body,
Like
like everything starts with the body. If you can hack that, you can hack your thoughts. You can basically come back to a powerful state.
Well, the superhero pose doesn't just have to be like a Superman. What I used to do in my office as superhero poses, I was open on my shoulders, I would just push back, and I would put my feet on the table and just occupy as much room as you physically can, and that will achieve the same effect as standing up in a Superman's pose. Just occupy as much room, open up your shoulders wide, open up your chest, and stay in that position for just 2 to 3 minutes, and you will feel transformation in how you feel and how your brain operates.
It's a simple hack that could lead towards like yoga, for example. Practicing yoga requires dedication, commitment, and like few other things, right? You need an instructor, you need a coach. But for example, the entire practice of yoga can be on opening your shoulders, on opening your like heart. Like you start breathing differently. So the contract between body and your internal biology also important. Like the way you breathe, is your breath shallow or you're breathing more calmly, confidently? So all these hacks basically we're going to talk about today are kind of transition. Like it's going to be easier for a child or for an adult. It's like minimum effective dose, right? To
Absolutely.
something bigger, major, and it's easier to implement, and it's easier to start with something simple. You don't forget, gamified, like playful, and then you can actually, once you feel the benefit of this, you want more.
Well, now that you mentioned that, simple with the biggest upside, sort of, that leads to bigger and better things, I want to talk about what I consider to be the number one neurobiohack of all, and that's gratitude. The reason why I consider that to be the number one neurobiohack of all is because we process information in a very negative way. The ratio that the researchers out of Berkeley clocked it to be at is 9-1, meaning for every bit of information, we process 9 bits of negative information for every bit of positive information we process, and that was evolutionarily very important. That enabled us to survive because we're always under threat, but we're no longer from threat from big cats. You don't have a tiger coming out of the woods and out to eat you right now. So now we perceive normal things, just emails and letters or communication, to be as a threat to us, which it's not at all. And the way to actually change that, the best way to change that, is gratitude. The reason why gratitude works so well, I think, is because it doesn't trigger our bullshit detector. Because you're grateful for things that you already happened, And the best way I found that, because I've tried different practices of gratitude, and I think Tony Robbins' approach is the most effective one, which is the visualized gratitude. At least it's the most effective for me. When I close up my eyes and I recall an event in my life that I'm really, really grateful for, and I visually imagine myself being there again, that actually, and I do that for about a minute. 3 different exercises, 3 different events, 1 minute each, which is part of Tony Robbins' priming technique every morning. I took it from that. I don't do the whole priming technique, but I took this piece out of it. I took another piece out of that. So visualize gratitude is what I do in the morning, and it's transformational in how it makes you feel. I think there's also a reason why it works so well, is because we now know that our brains can't tell the difference between real life an imaginary life, or actually vivid imagination.
But when it comes to gratitude, it's also, how to say that? It's like your imagination, you kind of tapping into something that you really have. So you don't have to imagine something that you don't have. You
Right.
do have that. It's in your life. It's either your experience or something that uh, made you happy or something that you're simply grateful for, right? And there is author of the book Life-Changing Power of Gratitude,
Mm-hmm.
Mark Ricklow, I think his last name, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. And he actually dived into the research of gratitude in terms of like empirical evidence and scientific evidence. And he found that a lot of religious books like Torah, Quran, was based on gratitude. That's why a lot of people, it was easier for them to believe in religion and like everything what the book said because they actually experienced the power of gratitude. And later on, the scientist from I think University of California, he actually started scientifically study gratitude. Richard Ammons,
Mm-hmm.
and his study showed proven scientific results. And at that moment, when like already science is starting to look into something that a lot of people actually believed before, it's hard to ignore. First of all, because he took patients with an anxiety, depression, and he experimented in terms of, and he also saw how the brain changes, right? Like with all the technologies we have
Yeah,
today.
MFRIs.
So Mark Ricklow, uh, his way to practice gratitude every single day is actually very interesting for me, and I realized that it's kind of gamified way for kids as well. So he makes a visual list, like a board,
Mm-hmm.
visual board,
Mm-hmm.
every single day. So he starts with, for example, if you start today, you put things that you're grateful for today, and then he adds 3 or 4 gratitude every single day. So the visual board becomes bigger and bigger and richer and more. It's like, and he says that once you make that list or board, eventually you'll memorize it, and
Mm-hmm.
it becomes your like automatic way of thinking, looking at the life. Like it becomes your lens basically. And when you look at your life through that lens,
Obviously, it's a completely different outlook.
yeah.
Obviously. And it might be the same researchers because I don't know who it was, but you mentioned University of California, and the paper that I read was from research out of Berkeley, so it's the same thing. And the 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 outcome is what's interesting because you mentioned the scientific measurements, and the scientific measurements show that once you start doing gratitude on a daily basis, that ratio of 9 to 1 becomes 5 to 4. So almost equal processing of negative to positive information. And we can only achieve that through gratitude. Nothing else that they've tested comes even close to changing that ratio of processing data of negative to from the negative bias to almost no bias at all. So that is why I believe gratitude is the most powerful one. Is because of changing of that ratio of processing information from negative to positive. Because evolutionarily, it was very important to process a 9 to 1 negative information to positive because that's how you survived. If you're always a happy go camper, guess what? You're not gonna make it very far. But that way, the fact that everything kind of first scares you, and then threatens you, your amygdala starts reacting right away. That's what's responsible for our survival.
And now I also think, especially in today's digital world, where like all the news trying to tell you, it's like where's this crisis, this negative, like everything is negative coming from the news. I haven't heard.
That's a business model, though, babe. It's because we react to negative information. It grabs our attention and we stay on.
But if you follow the news every single day,
Just don't.
then you need to make sure that you do gratitude twice as much
Or
five
do what
times
I
as
do.
much.
Don't follow the news. Tune out, and
Or
that's it.
Do your own research. For example, like a couple days ago, I told you about polar bears that they are actually increasing in terms of numbers, and nobody told us about that.
Because
But-
they don't want to report the good news. It doesn't sell. It does. Nobody clicks on the good news. People aren't paying attention to it. So do what I do. Don't pay attention to the news.
But it made me feel good about polar bears.
Polar bears. Yeah, you told me about it, but my response was stop paying attention to the news.
It was
Okay.
not from the news, it was from the paper.
Now that brings me to another super important neurobiohack, and that most important or really powerful neurobiohack is called the Maui habit, and it was brought to us by Dr. B.J. Fogg out of Stanford, who is responsible for giving us the Fogg behavior model, which I'm going to talk about later as well. Maybe not on this episode, but I want to dedicate a whole different episode to behavior formation, behavior design, and B.J. Fogg is going to be front and center in that episode. So the Maui habit, anybody who wants to know more about it should definitely Google up his TED Talk about that from 2014. The reason why it's called the Maui habit, because that presentation he did at Maui. And it's basically these amazing 7 words you say when you get up every single morning, which is today's going to be an amazing day. And even if you know today's not going to be an amazing day, you know it's going to be a very difficult day, altered a little bit to something like today's going to be an amazing day somehow, which is what I did yesterday. But every morning I do it. And the reason why it's so powerful is that we know now from numerous research studies on habit formation that habits tend to grow and multiply. So when you start your day intentionally by doing a simple habit like that, what it creates is it starts your day with creating that loop of other habits now easier to do. So
Completion loop.
Yes, you start your day with completing a habit, intentionally completing a habit. There's another aspect, I believe, to that habit, which he doesn't mention, but I think it kind of plays a factor, is that it sets your reticular activating system to pay attention to things that are going to contribute to you having a great day and kind of weeds out everything else. I think that's also an important aspect to mention there. But the most important thing about that habit is that it sets you up, it makes other habits easier to develop. And it's very important how he does it. You don't just get up and say that as you wake up. Like, you don't just wake up and say that. You actually... once you get up and your feet touch the floor, that's when you say that. The reason why that's important is because we know from Fogg behavior model that it's important to have a trigger, a prompt to setting habits, right? So that physiological aspect of touching the floor with your feet becomes the trigger. That's the trigger, So now we're kind of neurowiring habit formation and triggering, being conscious and being intentional. So all other habits will be much, much easier to set and develop. That is why I believe the Maui habit is a cornerstone of habit formation. When you try to develop and design habits in your kids on purpose, this will make it so much more easier because it just makes it easier because habits tend to grow and multiply.
Agree. And also, Maui habit is sort of, the way he actually realized the power of this habit is when he was in Hawaii and he got a note from his friend, right? The note said, every day is a gift.
Mm-hmm.
So he wanted to have that reminder every single day. And this is how he started to practice Maui habit. And for me, I was like, what I see is that it's basically gamified way to be grateful for waking up, for like having a heartbeat, for it's like so many things. So basically it's a gamified version, but it's also sort of a gratitude.
Yes.
If you like dive in deeper a little bit. So yeah.
Speaking of gratitudes, we didn't cover the fact that how we do it with our own kids. Because I mentioned the fact that I do a visualized gratitude every morning, but also every night before we go to sleep, that's what we do with our kids.
That's a pillow gratitude. So basically once their head touches the pillow.
No, but me and you do gratitude. I do at least 3 to 5 gratitude every night, and then you do it, then Sky does it, and Luna does it. We all say what we're grateful for before we go to sleep. And I don't think kids kind of get that for now, what it does and how it affects them, but we're just neurowiring that habit on them to do their gratitude before you go to sleep, and then they will understand the power of it and going to start doing it throughout their day. I remember the first time I've heard of gratitude was years ago, and Gary Vee was being interviewed on the things he does, and back then he didn't work out, he didn't do anything. Right now he works out, at least he has to, but this was like 7-8 years ago. And he said, "Oh, all I do is I practice gratitude every day, 3-4 times a day. I have an alarm set up for that, like 3-4-5 times a day. I practice gratitude." When I heard that, I was like, "What does it mean, practice gratitude? How do you practice gratitude?"
How do you change your attitude to gratitude?
So that's the first time I looked into it, and thanks to Gary Vee, believe it or not, because he said that, and I was like, "What does that mean to practice gratitude?" I looked it up, and I was blown away by the research on that.
There is this saying that if you'll practice gratitude, you'll have Thanksgiving every single day. Because we do have a holiday
Yeah, for that.
to say thank you, to be grateful for. But if you'll practice gratitude, you'll have Thanksgiving every single day.
That's really, really cool.
Maybe without turkey.
Okay, now I want to talk about another super powerful, super fun NeuroBioHack, which we actually do with Sky quite a lot because it's fun to do and it works every single time. And that's the Think Smile exercise. Right, in the Think Smile exercise, first I'm going to talk about what it is, and I'm going to talk about why it works so well. So we just basically close our eyes and we imagine ourselves smiling for 10 to 15 seconds. And what happens is you, whether you like it or not, start smiling and you start feeling better. Why does it work so well? Because our brains can't tell the difference between reality and vivid imagination. So when you actually just imagine yourself smiling, your brain reacts the same way as if something really happened in real life that made you smile. And it will release the same good feel endorphins and neurochemicals in your body. They will make you feel good. And it's interesting how science works because empirically we knew about the power of visualization for years and the fact that, you can just close your eyes and imagine things like athletes did it for centuries, right? They would visualize the win. They would visualize. We knew how it works. We never had, though, scientific data of why that it works for real until I believe it was Alvaro Pascual Leon out of Harvard in 2008 who set up this amazing experiment with the pianists where they invited 50 pianists for 5 days straight. They would play the same fast-paced music for 2 hours. And they would take their MFRI prior to the 5 days and afterwards. And what they observed is what they expected to observe, is that the part of the brain responsible for your fingers moving really fast, for your piano playing, kind of grew. It got stronger, the dandelions grew, the neural connections grew. But then they did something really, really interesting and amazing, is that after the first 50 pianists played that piece for the first week, they invited another 50 pianists. Only this time, they asked them not to play it, but just vividly imagine themselves playing the same piece for the same 2 hours, for the same 5 days. And they also took the MFRIs prior and after. And the results were absolutely mind-blowing because their brains changed in exactly the same way as of those pianists who actually played the piece, which was the scientific proof we needed, or at least we were missing in how the brain visualization works, because the brain can't tell the difference whether it's real or whether you're just imagining it. So now we can reverse engineer that and just imagine things and have your brain develop the same. You can literally just imagine yourself working out, right? Your muscles won't grow, but the part of the brain that's responsible for that will grow, and then it'll help you actually work out.
Actually, about athletes, they did a similar study on athletes. The only thing I don't remember was it either basketball 2 teams or football teams. So one team was keep practicing towards for the tournament, and another team was practicing their head.
Mm-hmm.
And the result, and they chose weaker team for imagining how they play.
Seriously?
Yes.
Okay.
And the result was that the team that was imagining how they practicing playing sport actually won.
Get out.
Yeah.
That's how powerful it is.
I'll look into.
Sometimes I see people looking at me in the sky with a little bit of like weird look, because me and him just closing our eyes and then start smiling and laughing. They think we're crazy probably, but we're doing something that's really, really powerful.
But it's also something that what Andrew Huberman is talking about, what enhancing learning. Once you learn something, and if you step back and take a pause and replay what you just learned in your head, you enhancing learning by like tremendous amount of, I don't know. So basically it probably also because you just pause, you replay it in your brain, and this is how you enhancing your learning.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, there's a lot to be said about visualizations. Even think about it this way. There was this amazing research on habit formation. from, let me look up their names because I don't want to screw it up. Andrew Huberman did a whole episode on habit formation. I believe it was episode number 53. Super powerful episode. If anybody who actually wants to take a deep dive on habit formation, I highly recommend, first of all, I highly recommend Andrew Huberman and the Huberman podcast on everything from neurobiology and neuroscience. And habit formation. So there was research done by Wendy Wood and Dennis Ruger. And that research, by the way, was published in an annual psychology review papers, which annual review papers are very established, powerful. They're the high end of review papers, annual review papers of any kind of medicine. And this was published in psychology. And basically what it says is that when you just perform procedural memory visualization of anything that you want to develop, it changes the likelihood from unlikely or moderately likely to very likely. And what does that mean? Well, we have two types of memory. We have episodic memory and we have procedural type of memory. So episodic memory is anything that happened in your life, the events that happened that you remember. And procedural memory is like the sequence of things you got to do to get an outcome. Like if you want to start a car, you got to open the door, sit in the car, put the key in ignition, or these days, press the button, right? There's a sequence of events to do. Or you want to make your coffee that you make every morning 3 times a day, you have to do all the steps. So when you actually sit down, you don't have to even close your eyes, but I do it with my eyes closed. And you visualize the sequence of events of the habit you want to develop, just doing it one time changes the habit development from unlikely to very likely, which is mind-blowing. Just doing it one time. So if you do it a few times, you just make it so much easier for your brain to develop that habit. Why that works? Again, because by visualizing it, you lower that limbic friction of doing something. That effort that you need to exert to do something is lowered in your brain. And that is why it's easier to do it. That is why the procedural memory visualization works so well. And we can apply it to anything we want to develop in our kids.
It's interesting. You just gave me an idea how to foster growth mindset in terms of visualizing the process, what needs to be done, versus most of us are guilty of visualizing the goal, the final outcome. So if you imagine yourself doing the process to get you to the goal versus having the goal,
it's much more powerful.
It makes it different also. Like for example, you mentioned coffee machine, and I realized a long time ago that the whole process of making is like a ritual for me. So I'm making coffee because I like the process of making coffee, like
as much as enjoying the drink itself. Even more
than drinking coffee, because you found a lot of my cups of coffee around the
full,
house
yes.
half full. So the whole process makes...
You enjoy the process. Well, that's why I tell Sky every time we go to like a hockey game or a chess tournament, I tell him to visualize not just the win, but how exactly you scored that goal, you made that checkmate. Especially when it comes to chess, I tell them, visualize the last 4 or 5 moves. Visualize them. Think them through. Exactly how you're going to set up the fork. Exactly how you're going to move that piece or that piece. Same thing when it comes to hockey. I tell them, whenever you're one-on-one with the goalie, visualize how you're going to fake him out.
You should see how yesterday he flew into the goalie.
Into the net? I'll see you tomorrow. We're going to a game tomorrow, right? Somewhere by Hartford.
Yeah.
It's going to be fun. So, and that brings me up to the last NeuroBioHack I want to talk about, which is probably the most important one. The reason why that is because it leads to the most powerful biohack that you can do, and that's meditation. Meditation is tremendously powerful, but how do we get our kids to meditate? That's the NeuroBioHack I want to talk about. And we know the power of meditation, and anybody who is curious about to learn about it more, please look it up, because it's transformational in how it affects our brain. Now that we have techniques like magnetic MFRIs, right? We can actually observe the brain structure change of people that meditate. And the change is very peculiar, because what happens is we lose gray matter density in our amygdala, in our most primitive part of the brain. It's responsible for our emotions. And we gain that gray matter in hippocampus and other parts of the prefrontal cortex, which shows us that you become less reactive and literally wiser, or at least more rational.
Richard Davidson, he was a pioneer of research in meditation. So he met with Dalai Lama a long time ago. And Dalai Lama asked him, Richard Davidson, he is a neuroscientist. And Dalai Lama asked, why are you using all the new technologies to research depression, anxiety? Why don't you research happiness, empathy, kindness? So that's how Richard Davidson took his team, all the technological equipment he needed, and he flew to Tibet.
Tibet.
And he studied all the monks that were meditating. And his discovery was shocking to him in terms of they were able to tap into gamma waves.
Yeah.
Those brain waves that are responsible for focus, for problem solving, and all of those powerful tools that a lot of humans are struggling in their everyday life. And after that, he researched more and more. You can look at into.
The research out of University of South Carolina showed that when kids meditate for just 4 days, their time
5 minutes.
5 minutes a day, just for 4 days, the amount of time they can focus now goes up exponentially. They were doing better on tests. They were less anxious. Especially it was tested in under the time restricted environment. Like when you have the test, you have a certain amount of time, which brings up anxiety, right? When your time is ticking and you have less and less time left to finish the exam. Those students, they meditated for just 4 days, 5 minutes a day prior to that exam, did way, way better than everybody else did, which is unbelievable. We're talking about 4 days, 5 minutes at a time, 20 minutes total, talking about an ROI on your effort.
Yeah.
You know.
And talk about how many pills should not be given.
Don't get me started on pills right now because it's going to be another 2 hours of this podcast.
Well, still, we need to mention that especially those kids that are struggling with focus, with the ability to solve problems or ability to even like comprehend the information, they could benefit from meditating. And at some point, if they'll do it regularly every single day, they might not gonna need certain
absolutely will not need
pharmaceutical help.
Not might. Maybe some will, but instead of pharmaceutical, we'll just give them a little bit of psilocybin or MDMA, or now they have other types of amazing therapies. Definitely not SSRIs, which is a shame on human. I don't even go there right now. So let's get back to this because I want to talk about the super NeuroBioHack that will enable your kid to meditate with ease. And we found the answer from Chait-Man Tang, right? The guy that used to work at Google. He used to have a course at Google called The Search Inside Yourself. And it was so popular, that course, he had like a 6-month wait line. And then he published this great book called Joy on Demand. I discovered that guy from this book, from Tim Ferriss's Tools of Titans, you know, where he talks about how we need to find the minimum effective dose of anything that we want to develop, right? And that we also know from BJ Fogg, that in order to develop any kind of behavior, you got to find the minimum effective dose because, you know, it's when you don't want to do something, you don't have high motivation to do something, it has to be very, very easy to do. So when you start to meditate, you don't have high motivation to meditate because you don't know that it works. So we have to find the minimum effective dose. And when I thought to myself before I read the answer, what would that be? I thought, well, maybe 5 minutes of meditation, maybe 1 minute of meditation. But no, it's actually not true. 1 mindful breath a day. And if you think about it, and if you do it, if you just close your eyes and you take that one breath, you see, and when you think about nothing but that one breath, you feel how actually transformative it is. Just one mindful breath where you think about nothing but that breath for that 1 or 2 seconds is very helpful. And if you do that every single day, if you make it a habit, if you include it part of your routine, what will happen is that will become your habit, and then you can build on that and build on that. And 30 seconds become easier, and 1 minute becomes easier, and then 5 minutes become easier. And that's how you actually develop a habit of meditating every single day for a few minutes or 20 minutes every single day. And I discovered meditation thanks to another guy that I admire, is Ray Dalio. And his book Principles is top 10 of my books of all time on my list. And when he published that book Principles in 2017, and he was doing his rounds, he was doing interviews to promote it, he was on a podcast with Meditation Bob. And on that podcast, he said something that struck me that I will never forget. He said, the number one reason for my success, the number one reason for the most successful hedge fund manager of all time, he said, is meditation. Transcendental meditation twice a day. When he said that, I was like, what? I was gonna like, I was about to, I was expecting some kind of like a lesson or some kind of a trick or some kind of financial knowledge that he would drop on me. And then he said that was his number one reason for success, meditating every day, twice a day.
Well, especially in financial world, it could be stressful. It could be very like ups and downs. Like every single day, they dealing with it. I
And when you manage hundreds and thousands of people every single day, you're not reactive to that. You're now being very, very rational.
But it also becomes one of the tools that kids can basically at any moment, if they train to do that, and if they know what to do whenever they feel anxious or it's like emotions that it seems like they can't control, it's something that they can take it out and use it.
Or better yet, if they do it right away every single day, they won't even get that way. They'll kind of prevent that reaction, that being emotional state. Because if you practice meditation every single day, especially if you do it twice a day, I struggle to do it twice a day to this point. I do it every single morning. And when I do it twice a day, I notice a significant difference. When I was going through Transcendental Meditation training, they told me that it quadruples the effect when you do it twice a day. So once a day is transformative, and twice a day is 4 times as transformative. Well, this was fun. This was fun. I really love this topic a lot, babe. NeuroBioHacks. And again, I'm going to set up neurobiohacks.com eventually, where you can just go and there'll be a training on all of these and you can be able to download it and get access to this whole thing.
Cool.
Thanks a lot for watching, and we're looking forward to speaking to you and listening or talking to you in our next podcast. Talk to you then.